Okay, everybody, good afternoon, and welcome to another live stream here on the Sitrep podcast channel. So I already have confirmation that we can hear the background sound effects. Jen, do me a favor, give me a 2-second test on how my volume sounds, and if we are okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Meanwhile, we'll wait just a couple minutes for some people to log on. But yeah, hopefully everyone's enjoying their Sunday. Hopefully everyone's, having some nicer weather now that we're moving deeper into May. And we're going to take a look at one of the big tank battles in the early part of World War II here in just a few minutes. The Battle of, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Battle of Hannut, if I'm saying that correctly. It's a city in northern Belgium. Alright, hopefully that helps our sound balancing issue. And we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, everybody. So, like I was saying, this is the Battle of Hannut. It's a city in northern Belgium. And this is where one of the first real tank battles was going to take place in World War II, or really in history. Of course, tanks have been used since 1916 famously. We saw them used in relatively large numbers at certain battles in the closing years of World War I. And that's all fine, but one thing that didn't really happen there was tanks fighting other tanks. To my knowledge, the only real tank engagement of World War I was at a town called Villers-Bretonneux, if I'm saying that correctly. 24 April 1918, where there was a grand total of 4 tanks engaged. 1 German A7 and 3 British, I think they were Mark Vs. 1 male and 2 female. That's not much of a tank battle. The entire tank battle, the entire breadth of tank versus tank warfare in World War I would make less than 1 Panzer Leader counter, and that's including both sides. 4 total tanks. Usually a Panzer Leader counter is 5 tanks. So it's not much to go on, needless to say. The Polish army in the previous 1939 campaign did have some tanks. To my knowledge, again, it depends on what you call a tank. The 7 TPs were actually pretty good, but there really weren't that many large-scale tank battles in Poland. There were a couple where there was like a company here and a battalion there, and tanks did technically shoot each other. But the Battle of Hannut would see 2 tank corps. A corps is a collection of divisions. Collide more or less head-on in a series of battles running from 12 to 13 May 1940. So here's a little bit of our background that we did for this game, just to get us set up. We're looking at, again, northwestern France, 1940. This is the beginning of the Case Yellow offensive. We'll be doing a lot of this Case Yellow stuff for over the next 6 weeks or so as we pass through the various 80th anniversaries of these battles. Again, the Battle of Hannut was May 12th and 13th, so we missed this one by a little, but that's okay. We're basically 80 years out from what most military historians consider the first set-piece tank battle, in World War II and in general. So again, we've gone over this 100 times before, so I won't, belabor the point. But the Germans, spearheading with Army Group A and Panzer Group Kleist, smashed through the Ardennes Forest on 10 May 1940, and they conduct this big left hook, and they're driving for these channel ports up here. This is going to seal off the northern part of the Allied armies, 1st and 7th French armies, the British Expeditionary Army, and the entire Belgian army. And what they're going to do is they're going to seal that off into a pocket and eventually push most of it off the continent. That, of course, culminates in Dunkirk, which we've all seen. Part of the plan that doesn't get as much attention is what was going on. Again, that was all Army Group A. So part of the plan that doesn't get that much attention is Army Group B to the north. So Army Group B was the supporting German attack. It wasn't the main German attack. And their job was really twofold. Number one, go into Holland, go into the Netherlands and get that sorted out. Pretty much just take over Holland. That was a 4-day, sometimes people say a 5-day campaign to take over the vast majority of the Netherlands. So no worries there. Perhaps more importantly, because it dealt with a lot more field maneuver forces, the other job of Army Group B was to advance into Holland and Belgium and lock the attention of the Allied armies who were waiting for the German attack along the French-Belgian border. So, of course, the Belgians were trying to maintain neutrality, but the Belgians were expecting a German attack sooner or later. They were trying to forestall one by pretending to be neutral. And that's going to come into, this question of Belgian neutrality is going to be a big, big deal for the Battle of Hannut. So everyone just bear with me for a second. So the Belgians knew that the Germans were going to come in eventually. However, they were trying to sort of forestall this, so they were pretending to be neutral. They did not want to antagonize the Germans in any way. So they didn't want to openly ally with the British and French. Also, Belgium has a large segment of its population that is pretty hostile to France in general. So the Belgian government couldn't, openly ally themselves with France, so they'd have a big, civil, problem within their own country or whatever. Leave all that aside. The point is the French and British are not allowed to enter Belgium until Germany invades. And that's going to be important. So, hold on a second. File that little factoid away. Okay, so Army Group B in the north, part of the German attack, their idea was to hit the Allies in the front and sort of fix their attention. The metaphor that's used in a lot of books is they are the red cape waved by the matador. And what they're going to do is they're going to trigger some of these Allied contingency and preparation and mobilization plans, response plans, for the expected German offensive in the West. So the Allies knew something was coming. They had a plan sort of on the table ready to go. And that plan was triggered once the Germans attacked. So the Germans attacked in the north a little bit earlier than they did in the south. Their main attack was in the south, so they actually forestalled that just like, probably 6 hours, 12 hours. Probably not 12 hours, but a little bit. Just enough to let the Allies send out all the right, or in this case, all the wrong. Let the Allies send out all the wrong radio calls and start all the wrong divisions moving in the wrong direction. At least from the Allied perspective. So the Germans hit the front through Holland and northern Belgium, triggered these response plans, and in come the Allied armies. In come the French armies, in come the British Expeditionary Force. And they were following what was called the Deal Plan. Hello Skoback, and hello Novus Templar. Hello Because Science Teacher, everyone. Thanks for coming out. So as you can see here on this map, maybe you can't see it here, but right here is what they call the Deal River. Okay, and this is kind of where these blue lines sort of zigzag or, down through northern Belgium. So the Belgians knew that they were never going to stop the Germans. Their idea was to set up sort of a screen, a delaying action, a light defense, and then fall back. They were fighting a delaying action, trying to maintain a cohesive front line even as they were giving ground. They were going to fall back from the German border, which is, roughly here, and as they fell back, they would meet the Allies coming the other way. So again, the Allies were not allowed to enter Belgium for various political and social and other reasons, diplomatic reasons, until the war actually started. The war starts, or at least the invasion starts, on May 10th. The Belgians start falling back, the French and the British come in, and they're supposed to meet here on what they call the deal line. Okay? Needless to say, this didn't work, as I've said 100 times now. So, while probably 80% of the tanks available to the Germans in the May 1940 offensive are down here in Panzer Group Kleist, that's in the Motorized Corps commanded by Hermann Hoth, Reinhard, and of course my boy Heinz Guderian. These big three armored symbols down here. This is like maybe not 80%, but at least 70%, 75% of the main German striking force is coming in here for armored, for their tanks, for their famous Panzer divisions, are coming through the Ardennes. The exception to this, the 20% of the German tanks that weren't in this big mass grouping, were in Hoepner's 16th Panzer Corps, and they were attached up here to Army Group B. So Army Group B, again, is the secondary, the supporting attack that's going into Holland and Belgium. They do have some tanks to sort of help them out with some of their spearheads, and also just to give them some offensive punch. But again, this is the secondary supporting attack. Their job is almost as bait. Trigger the Allied contingency plans, have the French and British Expeditionary Force haul ass into Belgium, and once they sort of step in the bear trap, Guderian, Reinhard, and Hoth slam the door behind them. Now, as you can see, if the Allied armies pretty much start off in this band here along the French and Belgian border, it's going to be really hard for the Germans to get behind them and cut them off. In order for the German sickle cut plan envisioned by General von Manstein, he would make field marshal a little bit later, I think. But in order for Manstein's plan to actually work, the Allies have to fall for the bait. The Allies have to jump into Belgium, as per the deal plan. And that was the job, or one of the jobs, of Army Group B. Army Group B's main punch, again, was Hoepner's 16th Panzer Corps. So Hoepner's 16th Panzer Corps rushes in, and they're pushing down through central Belgium here, and they are met by a pretty powerful French counterattack under the command of General, I think his name is Henri Priou, and he is the commander of the French Cavalry Corps, which, trust me, isn't cavalry. They call cavalry the way we call cavalry nowadays, armored cavalry or light tanks. These are probably two of the divisions that are kind of the closest thing that the French have to an actual armored division in 1940. So we have two German panzer divisions, 3rd and 4th, making up the 16th Panzer Corps, colliding more or less head-on with 2nd and 3rd Division Légère Mécanique, if I'm saying that even close to correct, light mechanized division. These are, again, the closest thing that the French have to anything kind of like a panzer division or an armored division in the 1940 campaign. So, as the Belgians are supposed to be falling back, they're falling back in good order. We saw last week where they were putting up a damn good fight in the Ardennes with very, very limited resources. Here in the center part of Belgium, however, far from the canals of Holland that offer some defensive bonus, and far from the mountains and the forests of the Ardennes that offer a defensive bonus, in the open rolling fields near Brussels, Namur, Gembloux. This is the old Waterloo battlefields of 1815. Nice, rolling, open terrain. This is dream tank country. When you find yourself on these nice, flat, rolling plains, and you're attacked by German tanks in 1940, you don't have to run because you're already dead. The Belgians in this part of the war didn't stand a chance, and they didn't last very long at all. They didn't get a chance to fall back. They were flat out overrun. And the Germans punched clean through, and they thought they had achieved their big panzer breakthrough. The main point of a panzer division in the early part of World War II is to turn the war into a road trip. You don't want to be fighting through streets and buildings and woods and over bridges and canals and all this terrain nonsense. You want to be on open ground, and you want to basically be going as far as your fuel tank will let you. That's the point. That's the goal of an operational, armored commander. And on, again, 11 May, they had pretty much done that. Second day of the war. They had smashed what few Belgian forces were in front of them, and they are hauling ass, open, flat out open country, Patton style, right across the fields of central Belgium. So they weren't really expecting to hit anybody yet. They were expecting to maybe meet some French back here along the Deal line, because again, the Germans sort of knew what the Allied contingency plans were, and they were sort of expecting to meet, these the French here on the Deal line. As you can see, we're nowhere near the Deal line yet, so this is important for the game. Hoepner's Panzers are pretty much just cruising, man. They got the they got the windows down, they got their feet hanging out the window, they got Def Leppard on the radio. They're just cruising, man. They're not. They're literally, it's smokes and road beers, road trip time. They're just cruising. Unfortunately for them, the French are beginning to realize just how badly the Belgians have fallen apart, at least in this sector. Again, the Belgians did better in other parts of this battle, but here the Belgians really kind of, we're having a lot of trouble. They had pretty much ceased to exist, at least in this attack corridor. So Priou gets orders from First French Army Commander, to move forward and never mind the deal plan. We have to be a little bit flexible here. We need to meet the Germans further ahead than we originally planned. We have to push up all of our schedules. So Priou starts pushing forward, as we see by that big blue arrow there. Priou says, okay, I'm going to meet the Belgians coming back, and when I meet the Belgians, that's my signal that the Germans are going to be right behind them. Okay, because he was assuming, again, the Allied communications were very bad. Priou was assuming that the Belgians, per the deal plan, were trying to fall back in good order. The Belgians had already been overrun here, and the Germans were advancing into open territory at full speed. So Priou thought that he was going to beat Belgians first, Allied Belgians, and he was going to be able to coordinate with them in a unified defense. He thought that the Germans were a lot further back than they really were. The Germans were way ahead of where he thought they were. What this means is where that blue and gray arrow meet here at the town of Hannut. What that means is we're looking at 2 French cavalry divisions, armored cavalry divisions, and 2 German panzer divisions, more or less unaware of each other's presence, colliding head-on the morning of 11 May. The morning of 12 May, 1940. That's a bit of a simplification. There were some skirmishing battles right before that, and we'll get into that super brief, but on an operational level, these 2 arrows more or less blundered into each other, kicking off one of history's first very large tank battles. So this green rectangle here is going to be the size of today's Panzer Leader game area, slightly larger than the normal double board 1974 Panzer Leader published boards. A little bit bigger than that, scaled to 200 meter hexes, because I'm trying to include some of the terrain features that were important here. So the map had to stretch just a little bit in order to get everything on there at the proper scale. And here's where we're going to see, again, we're doing part of the battle. 3rd Panzer Division here in the north, 4th Panzer Division in the south. You glue these 2 together, you throw in some corps support and headquarters elements. That's Hoepner's 16th Panzer Corps. They're pushing in out of the east. Their job is to take Hannut as soon as possible. They jam in some of their motorized infantry, some of their Schützen regiments in the center there, because you never want to send tanks into a city. They sent their motorized infantry into the city. Some of it, a huge amount, that's about half of 1 division's motorized infantry. There are 2 divisions here, and they basically have half of 1 division's. So 3/4 of this corps' motorized artillery is still strung out on these roads back here out of fuel. The ball and chain of armored warfare, as Guderian says. With that, the Germans were already having supply problems. It's day 3 of the big offensive in the west. The Panzers are up here, the mechanized, some of the mechanized Schützen regiments are up here. And, some of the other motorized support, the recon divisions, the Panzer artillery, not divisions, the Panzer recon battalions, the anti-tank battalions, the engineers, things like that. So here's a bit of a zoom in and a little bit more of a detailed look at how this battle shook out. Again, we're looking at what's going to be happening in the green arrow. We're seeing a lot of these armor symbols. These little blue rectangles with the little tank tracks in the middle. That's an armored symbol. Blue is French, gray is German. And we're seeing a lot of blue and a lot of green and a lot of little armored symbols. This almost never happens. We all love to play tank battles in our tabletop games. Guys, it almost never happens. Okay, the idea of tanks fighting other tanks is 9 times out of 10 kind of nonsense. Battle of Hannut is that 10th time, though. Once in a while, it does happen. Half the time, it's completely by accident, and this is one of those times. But, yeah, we're going to see a lot of tank versus tank action, a lot more than usual. This is what makes the Battle of Hannut so much fun to do in Panzer Leader. Raymond Cruz first took a stab at this as a designer when he designed Scenario 1, really, the very first scenario you play, in Panzer Leader 1940 expansion, first published in 1978. So people have been looking at this battle for a long time on the gaming table. It's a fun battle. It's one of the few times you can historically and realistically set up 2, air quotes, tank armies and really have at it. Again, that almost never happens in real combat. But it happened here, and it's fun to do. It's also fun because it's a meaty engagement. Very rarely do you have Army A enters from this side of the table, Army B enters from that side of the table, let's have a battle. Bring out your D6s. Guys, that's not how warfare works. You know, war is not a jousting tournament. It's somebody has to hold something, somebody has to come and take it. And the people that are coming to take it have to outnumber and outpower and outgun and outmaneuver the people on defense by 3 to 1, or the battle has never taken place because the general isn't that stupid. This is where some games like Panzer Leader and other slightly more realistic war games start to start to, you know, people are kind of surprised, and they don't get what they expect out of a war game. They don't get a fair battle. They don't get even victory conditions. They don't get, you know, a balanced table. You get one guy on defense with all the terrain, all the victory hexes, or all the victory points, all the objectives in his possession, all the defensive bonuses, and then you've got the other guy who has all the attack bonuses. He gets the airstrikes. The idea of both sides having air power on the table at the same time is just, no, doesn't happen. Artillery, tanks, both sides having tanks on the table at the same time almost never happens. And so on and so forth. The one exception to that is kind of a meaty engagement. This, where 2 columns sort of collide with each other. They almost didn't expect each other's presence, and that's sort of what happened here at Annuit, in very broad terms. Just to make sure I got the scale of the table right, I went to Google Earth and I, actually found this battlefield, scoped it out, and again, scale is very important in this game. And I'm not talking about the scale of the vehicles, I'm talking about the scale of the battlefield. How many kilometers are really between these towns, where the roads are, and things like that. So that takes care of the battlefield super fast. We'll now switch over to forces. Again, looking down at these rather simplified maps, here's the not so simplified map, but here's the rather simple one. We're looking at all of 4th Panzer Division, or at least what they had up. Again, they've got long columns behind them, run out of fuel. But the leading third, or the leading half of 4th Panzer Division is up against the southern wing of 3rd DLM. 2nd DLM, this is the 2nd French Armored Division down here, is more or less underneath this river. They're holding the southern bank of the river. They do send up some units, elements of 13th Dragoon Regiment, and we'll be looking at that in just a moment. But largely, it's 3rd DLM standing alone against 3rd and 4th Panzer Divisions. These guys were down here, the 2nd DLM, they were down here having lunch for some reason. Again, coordination, command tactical and operational level coordination for the French was abysmal. They might have fought well tactically. Their sergeants, their lieutenants, their captains, their majors, their colonels, all solid, just like their troops. Their brigadier generals and so on, and not so much. And that's where it really starts to fall apart. Here's an example. You've got 3rd DLM fighting 3rd and 4th Panzer, while 2nd DLM is wondering what all that noise is. How about you come up here and help us? How about you threaten the south flank of 4th Panzer? Okay, fine, we'll send like 1 company of 1 regiment. Dude, that's not what I meant when I said help. I meant help us. Come across these bridges and, hit the Germans in the left wing here. It didn't really happen, and that's pretty much why the Germans historically won the Battle of Hannut. So here's Hannut here. This is the Battle of Hannut on 12 May. This sort of evolves and progresses into the Battle of Murdoch back here on 13 May, and then this whole battle area kind of pivots to the southwest and kind of heads off the map, and we end up in the Battle of the Gamblo, or some people call it the Gamblo Gap, and that is May 14th and 15th. And those three battles, some people merge them all into one big campaign, but these three towns are, and the engagements at these towns are pretty much what handed the Germans central Belgium in May of 1940. Hello, Piotr. How you doing, sir? No worries, Piotr. We are really just getting started here. We've gone through some of the history, and now we're going to go through scenario construction. So this was the map that I drew up last night. This is custom for this battle, obviously. It again looks primarily at some of that the map images and the Google backup, the Google images. I'm sorry, the Google Maps and campaign maps that we were looking at on the previous tab. Again, 200-meter hexes, and these are the battlefields. A lot of not very much water. We have this river down here in the south that provides an obstacle, and we have a bit of a ridge up there to the north. These towns tend to sit on, or seem to sit on a general ridge, probably 7 or 8 kilometers long, and maybe 1 kilometer north to south. The southern shoulder of which appears on the northern part of our map. But mostly it's this corridor in the middle of flat, open ground. There's a little bit of Belgian farmland in here. Not so much bocage, but you know, your usual tree lines between small, you know, old family farms, towns, little winding country roads. It's classic North European, you know, World War II sort of terrain. There are no rivers here. There are no streams. People from last week's stream might remember the nightmare terrain that we had to deal with in the Ardennes Forest. That's by design. The Ardennes Forest, as we all remember from the Battle of the Bulge, was kind of a nightmare terrain-wise. Here, not so much. This is why the Belgians had a very, very hard time in this part of the war. Is when you're on defense, again, on this ground, you're in trouble. You better have some artillery. You better have some entrenchments. You better have some armored reserves. None of these things the Belgians had, and they lasted about 5 minutes against the Germans on some of these battlefields. So again, some of these French forces were here ahead of time. Preux's Cavalry Corps did advance into this area. He advanced kind of. He's a cavalry commander, you know, obviously. So he's much more interested in the attack than the defense. And as he sort of rolls up here, he knows there are 2 German Panzer Divisions out here somewhere. He's expecting to meet Belgians coming back at him the other way. Didn't happen that way, as I've already, you know, reviewed. But he's charged with holding Hannut. Now, this is the situation on the morning, mid-morning, maybe early afternoon, probably about noon, midday. Well, let's just call it midday, on 12 May. So there's already been some battles, some skirmishing to the northeast of Hannut, and there's been a tiny bit of skirmishing in Hannut itself. But these were pretty much just motorized dragoons in a screening position. Their idea was to spot the enemy, send a radio call, here they come, fire a few shots, force the Germans to deploy and go online, and then get the hell out of there. And that was going to waste a lot of German time and provide forewarning for the Germans. So rather than try to recreate that and with a whole bunch of special rules, you know, forcing the French player to retreat or whatever, we just set them up in their secondary positions. So they've already withdrawn out of Hannut and fallen back here. Also, if I wanted to include where that skirmishing took place ahead of time, I would need like another 10 or 12 hex rows to the east and 7 or 8 hex rows to the north. This map would be about double the size. So the hell with that. This map is already too big. So again, we're just assuming that that part of it's already happened. So the French force is down here. This is the force that's already set up on the table. They're allowed to set up in the towns that they historically occupied, or points further west if they want. I went ahead and jammed all the French forces up here to the north, so there would be no problem putting their defense. I'm sorry, I'm reading some Skype calls at the moment. I'm sorry. In order to get us up there. Hold on 1 second, everybody. I gotta take care of something super fast. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. So I went ahead and just set up the French in their secondary positions. I didn't set up any kind of a backfield. I've got tons of tanks coming in from the west, so it's going to be fine. I'm not worried about my backfield right now. But for the moment, I've got my dragoons. I think that's 1 battalion of the 11th Dragoons, if memory serves, already set up and ready to go. Yeah, 1 battalion, 11th Dragoons, along with the regimental headquarters. That's all part of a 2nd DLM. Okay, and then here we have the end of turn 1. So the end of turn 1, these are the positions that both sides were able to get to. Except for the French that had already set up, we've already gone over that. The Germans move first, they are technically the attackers, and they are coming in from the east. They can come in on any eastern road. They have to stay in column formation, at least until they get eye-to-eye contact with a French force. Because again, they're supposed to be semi-surprised that there is a major French force here at Hannut. They know there's some skirmishers. Like I said, they ran across some of the stuff in the previous hours, the very closing hours of May 11th, and definitely the opening hours of May 12th. So they knew there was going to be some sort of a scrap here, but they had no idea they were about to get hit by 2 French armor divisions, I can promise you that. So again, we're looking at the bulk of 4th Panzer Division that came in along these roads, and this was as far as they could get. Immediately after that, we have the 1st French turn, now complete. They came in along all of these western roads, and they could get as far as they could get. Or they advanced as far as they could get, given their movement rates, the roads, and so on and so forth. So, a couple small points of interest. The French armor here, which is, by the way, pretty damn good. Somua S-35s, and a ton of them. 2nd Cuirassier were able to advance up these roads at a pretty brisk pace. They haven't reached any of their friends here in the 11th Dragoons yet. So they're close. They're within about, again, these are 200 meter hexes, so they're about a kilometer away from actually linking up with their forward infantry. However, German tanks are just too fast, and German tanks are now more or less between the French tanks and some of that forward infantry. These 2 platoons of Hotchkiss H-39s, by the way, they were attached to these guys. They were attached to 11th Dragoons. They weren't part of this follow-on force. Again, that's just the history. Another part that's a little interesting is, okay, so these are these 13th Dragoons. These are the ones that were loaned from that division in the south I was talking about before. 2nd DLM. So here we are. So I'm sorry, I got a little distracted there. Let me zoom out a little bit and we'll take another look at this. Okay. So you guys remember that, I won't go back to the tab, but you guys remember where this is mostly 3rd DLM's battle, Division Légère Mécanique. This is mostly 3rd Cavalry Divisions, whatever you want, or light mechanized division. 3rd Division's battle here in the north. 2nd Division is in the south, kind of, again, sitting around wondering what all that noise is up north. The exception to that is the 13th Dragoons. 2nd DLM did detach 1, maybe 2 companies of 13th Dragoons and sent them across these bridges, across this river, to help out. And that's what these 2 columns are here. So they came in through this road hex here, through this town, and these S-35s are actually pretty quick. And they were able to get to where they actually collided with 7th Panzer Aufklärungsabteilung. That's basically gibberish for, or not gibberish, but German for 7th Recon Battalion, 7th Armored Recon Battalion. So we have some German armored cars and some German motorcycles here that are up front and personal with some S-35 tanks. And things are about to get kind of scary right here. Obviously in Panzer Leader you cannot move and attack in the same turn. A tank can overrun while moving, but not if it used the road movement rate, because it's considered to be in in column formation. Hello, Chip on YouTube. Thanks very much. Itinerant Hobbyist, another day, another live stream. Nice. Thanks very much. Yeah, we're doing a nice big early war tank battle. One of the first big tank battles, period, in World War II or warfare in general. Cool. Thanks very much, Piotr. Thanks very much for the kind words on the map. Yeah, the map took a little while, but that's fine. What I do with the map, guys, is I keep the labels separate. So later on, if I want to, either A, replay the game, I have the Excel file, or B, if I just want to use part of the map, I can flip it around, I can invert it, I can change the names of the towns or whatever, I can use a detail of it, and save myself some time later for a non-historical sort of a scrimmage game. Hey, let's just play some Panzer Leader, throw down a map, throw down some units, and have some fun. That becomes easier when the actual names of the terrain features, towns and rivers and so on, are detachable. So we have a bit of a scrum getting ready to get started right down here in the south. Of course, these motorcycles are about to be the hasty retreat, but that's the reason, what I was talking about before, this is the reason these motorcycles are still alive, is these S-35s came barreling down this road in column formation. They saw these guys, they stopped. They can't overrun because they use the road movement rate per Panzer Leader rules, and you can't move and fire in the same turn, especially French tanks. So, believe it or not, these motorcycles are still alive if they leave right now. Moving forward to turn 2, where we were going to get started today, but real life got in the way. Here we go to turn 2, and the Germans have started. There was no real line of sight or line of fire for any German units, again, except those motorcycles. Those motorcycles only have an MG-34. They can't hurt a Somua 35. In Panzer Leader, this is reflected by I-class weapons are not allowed to attack armored targets, period. So, needless to say, those motorcycles, even though those Somuas were right in front of them, couldn't shoot at them. They saw these 30-ton tanks coming down the road, and if you're in a motorcycle in a sidecar with an MG-34, you go the other way. So those German motorcycles did a little bit of a fishtail, and they hauled ass back behind that tree line. Armored cars also kind of skidded off the road and took cover. German engineers came up. Most German armored recon battalions did have a platoon of Pioneer combat assault engineers attached to them, along with some infantry guns, some anti-tank guns. They were like little miniature Panzer groups, really. And the German the German generals used them accordingly. So that's pretty much what we have here in the south. 7th Panzer Aufklärungsabteilung. Again, 7th Panzer Reconnaissance Detachment. Abteilung technically means detachment. It's really a battalion. So I'm going to use Abteilung. I'm going to say battalion a lot, but I'm not trying to, mangle the German language here. It's really a battalion. And meanwhile, the Germans also bum rush the French with tons of tanks, and we are trying to, get line of sight on some of these French tanks, try to pin them down. And same up here, we're going to go ahead and assault this town, Crehen. This, historically, is where the battle really got started, and I'm kind of following suit here in our Panzer Leader game. The Battle of Crehen, or I should say the little village of Crehen, if I'm saying that right, is where the first real contact came between elements of 4th Panzer Division and 1st Battalion, 11th Dragoons Regiment of 2nd DLM. So this is the end of the German turn. There was no real line of sight, so I couldn't really take any fire. My artillery here of 103rd Artillery Regiment, I have 3 batteries of 10.5 centimeter guns. These guys were still unlimbering, so I couldn't send them back any fire missions. You're not allowed to send fire missions to artillery that's still limbered in Panzer Leader. So I'm unloading my guns. It took all turn because those are bigger than 75 millimeter. And I'm setting up a bit of a infantry assault here out of the northeast as well. Unfortunately, that was the bulk of German turn 2. And now we're going to start with French turn 2 and see what happens here. So Sitrep Podcast says, "What's up?" Not much. We are Craig. Hello. Yes, Craig. Many tanks over on YouTube. We have many tanks. They're not the best tanks, but it's you know, hold on, I'm getting some messages here. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. Yeah, not, you know, the best tanks, but you know, pretty it's what was there historically. So the Germans outnumber the French in tanks about 3-1 in this game, and that sounds like it's pretty horrible. But here is, if I take a quick look just to kind of go over this, at the opening force, we have pretty solid French tanks. We're not looking at any Hotchkiss, you know, well, okay, a few. We're not looking at any Renault 35s. That made up about 80% of the French tank force in 1940. We're looking at Hotchkiss 35s, which were slightly better, Hotchkiss 39 upgrades, which were definitely better, and hella better are the Somua S-35s. These are probably the best tank the French Army has in 1940. The Char B1 gets all the credit, gets all the glory, but it's really not as good. It has that big 75mm howitzer in the hull, of all places. The Americans would make the same mistake later with the Lee Grant. One-man turret. It's got a lot of problems, and it's slow because it's huge for the time. It was very, very thickly armored. The Samoa was a great little medium tank that did everything pretty well. It's got a solid attack for a 1940 game that's 6. It's got an A-class weapon. It's got a 47mm anti-tank gun in it. The range is 3, which is pretty sad, but for 1940 it's awesome. Notice all German tanks have a 2, except for these howitzers, and we'll get into that in just a second. 6 defense, which is killer, and it's got an 8 movement, which is damn good for 1940. In fact, it's damn good for anything. It's damn good for Vietnam. It's not until the, you know, Abrams and T-80 start running around that you start seeing tanks with main battle tanks with speeds much faster than this. So these Somua 35s are actually pretty damn good. All cast hull. The hull of the Somua S-35 is often rumored to be one of the direct inspirations for the Sherman that would come out in about 2 more years. At least the early Shermans with that all-cast hull. All-cast hull weighs a little bit more, but you have no weld lines. You damn sure don't have any rivets or any bolts or anything like that. For 1940, it was a damn good tank. It did have 2 Achilles heels, though, and this is pretty much endemic to the whole French armored force. 1, at the most, 2-man turrets. So your commander's up there. He's also the loader in the turret. He's the commander. He's the loader. He's also the gunner. And God save you if he's also the company commander. Because guess what? He has no radio. At least not to his units. The only radio he has is up to his battalion and regimental commander. Basically every 3 French tank counters in this game have 1 radio between them. So if you're trying to command stuff for your platoons within your company, you're looking at those Soviet signal flags and all that nonsense. Compare that to German tanks, which every single crew member has a throat mic. Not tank, crew member. Every single tank has at least 1 radio, if not 2 or 3, depending on the level of command. The way Panzer Leader sort of tries to approximate that is by use of the split move and fire rule. This gives the Germans a much better tactical flexibility than the French do. Thinking about learning baseball rules and maybe even trying a game or 2 when the season starts. Okay, awesome. Any Sharbies? Craig, no, they will probably be in our next game. So, super fast. Oh, sorry about that. Got distracted for a second. So, great question, Craig. This battle today is taking place here on this yellow rectangle here, Battle of Hannut. This is second and third Division Légère Mécanique, DLM light mechanized division for the French. Lots of S-35s, lots of H-39s, but no French Char B1s. I do have the counters made up for them, and they will be in these battles here at Montcornet, and then later on here at I'm not sure if this is exactly in the right place, but Cambrai or Cressy. There's another big attack down here somewhere. This is de Gaulle trying to launch some forces with his, I think it was 4th Armored Brigade. He had a lot of French Char-B ones. And then you see French Char-Bs a lot in the second phase of the German invasion of France. That's Case Red, beginning after Dunkirk. So yes, Dunkirk was not the end of the Battle of France, no matter what a British historian will tell you. Dunkirk was the halftime show. Immediately after Dunkirk, the Germans pause, regroup, pivot to the south, and begin the invasion of the rest of France. That's a whole new offensive called Case Red that goes through the first 2 or 3 weeks of June 1940, and that's when you see a lot more of those French Char-B ones. So we will get them. They're just not in this particular battle historically. But again, personally, I prefer S-39s. I'm sorry, S-35s. This is going to be one of the best French tank forces you ever see. This was the tip of the spear, at least as far as the French could manage in 1940. The S-35, especially in large numbers. And yeah, the French had whole battalions and whole regiments of these, or I should say battalions, whole battalions of these S-35s in their, let me get the actual name of the unit here, in 2nd Cuirassier Regiment. So 2nd Cuirassier Regiment was more or less made up of 4 battalions, 2 battalions of S-35s, 2 battalions of H-39s. Hence the little stacks we see here. And then there were some more S-35s and maybe Hotchkiss 39s, or Hotchkiss 35s, excuse me, detached from 2nd DLM to the south coming across those bridges. Alright, everybody. So, spoilers, this was supposed to be a live game. Unfortunately, my opponent is having a internet crash at the moment. So we are not going to, I think, have a live game at the moment. Let me contact him one more time here. Alrighty. And quick drink of coffee. Okay, so like I said, we're at the we're in the middle point of turn 2. So what are the French going to do? I'm just going to start from the top and work my way down. Here is an abridged turn sequence. I'll keep that handy. I will also keep handy a copy of the CRT, Combat Results Table, more affectionately known as the kill chart. And I'll just kind of keep that nearby so that we can game a little bit more efficiently. So, again, I do apologize. This was supposed to be a live stream. Well, it's a live stream. It was supposed to be a live game, I should say, with a live opponent. That has sort of kind of shit the bed at the moment because of some internet issues over on the other side of the water. We're going to proceed as best we can, though, with a couple of just a couple turns here to show how early war Panzer Leader works. Again, we're going to be doing early war Panzer Leader pretty much, I don't want to say non-stop, because we do have DM Ben Phu to finish up, and we have a few other projects. 13 days to 13 hours is still going. But at least on my desk, Panzer Leader 1940 is going to be the belle of the ball for the next 6 weeks. Again, it's because we're going through all these 80th anniversaries of one of the most remarkable armored campaigns that's ever happened. The world had never seen this before. The world is probably never going to see this kind of thing again. It was, I mean, it's never good when 1939 to 1945 Germans are winning, so I'm not trying to say that by any means. But from an academic perspective, as a historian, as a military enthusiast or whatever, these are remarkable times. This really is never going to happen again. Oh, thank God. But when the 80th anniversary of these kind of battles swing around, you want to take a look at it. Especially in Panzer Leader, because why not? Always an excuse to run Panzer Leader. Like Chip was saying before, early war, he loves the early war. I agree, at least in Panzer Leader. When it comes to Panzer Leader, early war is often a lot more fun than late war. Early war and mid-war desert. By the time you get into the classic, Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, stuff in June 1944 going forward, I mean, yeah, the battles are fun, but not really, because everyone's guns are so high-powered and everyone's guns, it's even more importantly, are so long-ranged that movement really slows down. That becomes just mass application of firepower. It's how long the Germans can hold on versus massed British and American artillery. And then maybe you might see some tanks. But there's surprisingly little movement or maneuver in an actual battle in Panzer Leader, a realistic battle. As opposed to early war, where everyone's guns have a range of 2 or 3, and these nice open fields, you have a lot of maneuver. You can do some pretty funny dances here, as we're about to find out. Okay, so the French are going to go ahead and, let's see, they're going to try and call in some artillery. Their guns are much smaller. These are their artillery pieces here. Their guns were much smaller than the Germans' artillery pieces, so they could unload them in half a turn. What that means is the French were able to have their artillery, ironically, set up before the Germans did. Because the French have 75s, the Germans have 10.5s. So what that means in game terms is, first phase of the turn, call in new artillery. The French can actually do that, because their guns are already unlimbered. So where are the French going to call in some artillery? What can the French spot? Well, the French have plenty of targets, because the Germans have kind of bum-rushed them. Let's see here. Germans are going, or I should say the French are going to, oops. I did not make up French artillery markers. Give me 2 seconds, guys. The work of but a moment. That is good enough. Okay, there we go. Yeah, the French get artillery so infrequently, indirect fire artillery. Now, normally in Panzer Leader, when you call in indirect fire artillery, you don't put these little markers on the map, because it tells your opponent where the artillery is, obviously. But you write it down on a sheet of paper, that's why all the hexes are numbered. But here, again, this is pretty much a solitary game, just a quick demo, some of the rules or whatever. I'm just going to go ahead and slap down where I'm putting French artillery in. I don't have any of these guys spotted yet. I do have them spotted. You know what? I'm pretty sure that the Germans are going to assault the northwestern bank here, or the northeastern facing of the village of Crehen. I'm going to call in some presumptive artillery there. So I put 2 artillery markers there. That's for one of my that's each for one of my batteries of 75mm field howitzers. They are within 20 hexes. They are in range. At least I hope so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. No, they're not within range. Oh my god, that sucks. French artillery is not long range enough. Okay, I will call it in on some of these guys here instead. Okay. So, yeah, we're going to have to, because of the range, 20 hexes is the range here on those artillery batteries. I'm going to have to go ahead and call in some artillery on German tanks instead of the infantry that I'm assuming is going to be attacking the French up here at Crehen. Oh, James, do I need an opponent? That's okay, because we're kind of already kind of running late. I did have an opponent, but apparently the internet in the UK has died, so I don't have an opponent for now. I'm all for late war and heavy hitters and unrealistic numbers and scenarios. Again, it's going through history, Craig, and sort of like cherry picking the battles that are fun to do. With enough research, you can find. You don't have to be unrealistic, so I guess what I'm saying. It's easy to find, or maybe not easy, it's possible to find battles that have the kind of vehicles and the kind of numbers that you're asking for. One of my favorite battles to do is in northeastern Poland, along the approaches to Warsaw. It was one of the first times the Stalin II tanks were used. And this is August of 44, I believe. We have a full independent heavy guards tank regiment of the Soviets, guards independent heavy tank regiment, colliding with one of those schwere Panzerabteilungen of the Germans. So you have Tiger IIs and Stalin IIs in a Polish forest somewhere, just slugging it out. And that's a fun battle. Small, because neither side has a lot of tanks, but like full battalion strength, so 8 or 9 counters per side, and just some of the biggest tanks that both sides had. And that's the Eastern Front. That's where the tank battles were real tank battles. That wasn't any of this Western Front nonsense. I'm talking about big tank battles out east. King Tigers and Stalin IIs. So, and then you know what? There's also some stuff like Sherman Jumbo, Second Armored Division, fighting German Tigers. You do see some stuff like that, but you just have to go looking for it. Or you can just set up a board and Dream Team versus Mean Team, and just set up whatever kind of vehicles you want. It's no big deal. Oh, cool. I thought it began with an O, Yavasa, but it's in your country. I will totally go by what you say. I won't stop the game and find the map. It's all good. Virgin Media is having issues in the UK again. Okay, yeah, that might be what Damon's expecting. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so I know I've said this like 100 times now. Let me go ahead and try and get through at least a couple turns here on Panzer Leader. So the French are going to start off with their turn with calling new artillery. It lands next turn, so you have to sort of guess, or not guess, but you have to really try to predict where the enemy's going to be next turn. I'm pretty sure somebody is going to be here next turn. Those German tanks are in woods, but I am adjacent to them with these S-35s, so I do have them spotted. Obviously, I'm right next to them. So that's a legal call as far as artillery goes. So that's the call. Resolve last turn's artillery. There was no last turn artillery. Resolve airstrikes. There are no airstrikes for the French. Let's go to direct fire. Now, normally, these S-35s would be running like scalded dogs because they are, look at this. They are about to get bomb rushed by German tanks. Now, before this game looks too unfair, don't look just at the number of counters, the numbers on the counters, and perhaps even more importantly, the letter on the top of the counter. In a tank battle, what matters is A, armor piercing. Everything in the French force is armor piercing. It's all pretty powerful. Most German A-class tanks are 2. Most French anti-tank guns are 6. So a French tank is literally 3 times as good as most German tanks. I do have some Mark IIIs that have a 6, but even these aren't as good because these have a range of 2. The French guns have a range of 3. The Germans have better the French usually have better armor, 6 versus 5. And more than a third, between 35 and 40% of the total German force, and this is historically accurate, are these things. PzKpfwI 1s. 2, I2. 2 is the attack factor, I is the class, that's infantry class, and 2 is the range. Basically, we got 2 MG34s in a turret, twin machine guns. That's their idea of a tank. 3rd and 4th Panzer Divisions were not, they were not 1st, 2nd, and 10th. They weren't in Guderian's 19th Panzer Corps. They didn't have all the best stuff. And a huge number of these German tanks were these old Mark Is, which were never supposed to see combat, to be honest. Absolutely no worries. Sitrep podcast, I do appreciate it. IS-2 is a beauty. It's one of my favorite tanks. They had the early MGs. They're MG34s. MG34s are the early MGs. MG42s are the later Hitler buzzsaw ones. Now, if you actually look it up on like Tank Encyclopedia or Wikipedia or who knows what, you will find a different number, like an FF15 or something like that. It's an MG34 with a different mounting, but it's something like an MG34. Technically, from a manufacturing standpoint, I think it has a different name, but it's an MG34. It's an MG34 built to be mounted into the glacis or the turret of a tank. And then the more famous or infamous, the Higgins boat emptying machine guns that we see in Saving Private Ryan are the MG42s, which are the same thing. They're MG34s. They're just made with stamped metal rather than lathed metal. They're the same damn gun, they're just easier to manufacture. 2 MG34, okay, okay. They upgraded a lot of early tanks to the MG34, okay, that could be true, I'm honestly not sure. Again, if you look it up, it's gonna have a different name, because it's an MG34 that's has different furniture, a different barrel. It doesn't have that same barrel because it has to hook into either the coax mount of a tank turret or the glacis plate, you know, up in front of the hull, the bow machine guns. I think FF15 or you know, I don't even know, so I'm not going to guess and have the wrong answer. But okay, here's another good example: the 20mm automatic cannon that we see in the Mark II. That's the same 2cm anti-tank gun that we see in the German fighters, that we see in the flak guns. They all have different names because they have different muzzle brakes, different mountings, different block breaches, you know, different, you know, mechanical parts, but it's the same gun that's firing the same ammunition because it's in different applications. But if you find it on some sort of an online resource, they will definitely have different names. Okay, so it's time for the French direct fire. I was probably going to go ahead and shoot down into these German tanks. I should probably run for my life because I'm about to get surrounded. But what the hell? Let's not have a boring stream. Also, these French tanks are pretty damn powerful close up. So S-35s are going to go ahead and open fire. At point blank range, they double because they're an A-class weapon firing against armored targets. So these two are actually worth 12. Thanks, OBS. These two are actually worth 12 apiece, followed by these two that are worth 6 apiece. So I have a total of 12 plus 12 is 24. Another 12 is 36. How many do I want to engage? I'm going to try and pin down some of these tanks because I also have artillery coming in at them. They're all in wood, so I have to add 1 to my roll, but I am adjacent to them, so I do have them spotted. So, let's see, 36 to 10. If I engage 2 of them, that's actually pretty terrible. 12 and 12 is 24. These 2 are going to engage 1 at 4 to 1. These 2 are going to engage the next one at 2 to 1. Because I'm trying to maximize my kills here. So, oops, fix that box here. First, the 4 to 1. Add 1 to the die roll. That's a 4. That's still a kill. We have our first German wreck counter on the table. Meanwhile, this other guy is going to engage at 2 to 1. That's 6 plus 6 makes 12. Divided by 5 is 2 to 1. That is also a 3. 3 becomes a 4 because I'm in woods. He is pinned down. That's going to help because that means that he is not going to flee from the artillery that I have coming in. At least I hope not. Get a German wreck counter here. Kaboom! Alright, awesome. Alrighty, that's these 4 platoons of tanks have fired. Let's see what else we have for direct fire. Oh, look! We have a French anti-tank gun that is in this town. He was nice enough to, German Mark 1s were nice enough to pull right up on me. That's going to be 2 to 1. I'm going to try to pin down or destroy. If I do that, I'm going to come under fire from, oh boy. He's going to shoot this way. He's going to engage one of these Mark 1s. 4, A-class weapon, point blank range, doubles to 8 versus 4 is 2 to 1. He is in woods, so add 1 to the die roll. I cannot kill him, but maybe I can pin him down. This is literally a 25mm anti-tank gun. It's almost a heavy machine gun at this point. That would have been a kill if he wasn't in woods. 1, however, I'm in woods, so that becomes a 2. That is 1 Mark 1 Panzer, or 1 platoon of Mark 1 Panzers dispersed. Okay, the truck is going to back out of there. The truck is going to back out of there. Rifle platoon, up, up, rifle platoon, down. The truck's finished moving. Okay. Oh, I have some tanks down here too. Alright, so I have 2 tanks. These are Hotchkiss H-35s. They're going to fire point blank into the flank of these Mark 2s. I'm sorry, these Mark 1s here, right next to them. Those guys are not in woods. So we're looking at 10 plus 10. Again, they double at point blank range. A total of 20 versus... I'll take on 1 at 4-to-1 odds. I want to get some more kills. Because I want... I'll get to the victory conditions later, but I want more kills. And that was a miss, believe it or not. 4-to-1, a 6 is only a dispersal. That's really disappointing for the French. Great for the Germans. Oops. Not for the French. Okay. So a dispersed unit cannot move, cannot fire. It's pretty much stuck there. A double D on the CRT will kill it over here on these results. You also have to subtract 1, or I should say the attacker gets to subtract 1 when attacking it. Obviously, the low rolls are better in Panzer Leader. So you're trapped, you can't shoot back, and you're really vulnerable. You want to rally as soon as possible. A dispersed unit is terribly vulnerable and more or less useless. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish some more direct fire. Everything here is out of reach. Everything here is out of reach except for these 2 that have already fired, or these 4 that have already fired. The truck has no weapons. Here, those Germans came down this road behind that tree line and came out here. I can't see them because they're next to a tree line. When you're next to a tree line, guys, you're considered to be in woods. So those that lead company there of Mark IIs, these S-35s can't see them. They're 400 meters away in woods or on the bend in a road. So it looks like they're really close, but again, remember the scale of these maps. And these guys right now can't see anything because these armored cars are tucked behind that tree line. So, long story short, take your first shot. That is it for French direct fire. That's fine, because now comes French movement, which I've technically already started. And movement is where you really kill people in this game. Not with fire, it's with movement. Okay, so again, infantry platoons, we're setting up some cat attacks. The Germans did see that, because as they're moving through these town hexes, I do get a shot. We do have some opportunity fire. Germans are going to shoot back 2 points of machine gun fire, 2 points of machine gun fire, 4 more points of machine gun fire, 6 more points of machine gun fire, and 20 more points of Mark IV howitzer fire. So, yeah, some of these French units are in a lot of trouble here. Let me get the calculator out. So that first stack of Mark IIs, minus the 1, obviously that's dispersed, he can't shoot back. 2 plus 2, plus, repeat that to the northeast, 2 plus 2, plus 6 more to the top of that. That's these 3 tank platoons, so 2 points apiece. We're all firing into this hex here. And then we have, oh, they do not have line of sight. They're blocked by that tree line right in front of them. So those Mark IVs don't get to fire in opportunity fire. Okay, that's going to help the French out a little bit. I got a total of 14 points. I'm going to go ahead and try to fire at one of these rifle platoons here. That's going to be 2-to-1 odds. I have to add 1 to the die roll. Because they're in a wooden town hex, and another brick. So the Germans fired off all these machine guns, all these MG-34s or whatever they were, from 1, 2, 3, 4, well actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 platoons. That's I don't know what that's 35 tanks, 2 machine guns apiece, 70 machine guns, no effect. Because again, we're talking about pinning down an entire platoon of French armor and in buildings. from, in some cases, 400 meters away. So that looks absurd, and it's also a very bad die roll on top of everything else. But yeah, that's how it worked out. So what that means for the French is good news. We are going to be able to launch a pretty decent, what they call a close assault here. Alright, a slight problem I made in detail here. This guy moves into this hex. Bad news, because these two Mark IVs do have line of sight on him. That's the bad news for the French. The good news, they are in concrete and stone, concrete buildings. So I'm looking at 20. These guys get to fire after all, but just not at these guys. They have to fire at these guys. We're looking at a total of 80. What the hell? We're looking at a total of 2 platoons of 5 within half range at soft targets. H-class weapons get to double. So those are basically 10s, 20 points versus not 6, 11. Because we're using Arab Israeli War, urban combat, or urban hex rules. In concrete buildings, you get to add 5 to your defense. So that's 20, 10 plus 10, versus 11. That is a very, very sloppy 1-to-1. 11 divided by 20, yes, comes out to 1-to-1, because you always round in favor of the defender. 1-to-1 and add 1 to the die roll. In fact, you know what? I don't even know if that's worth it. It's not even worth it. I'm not even going to take that shot after all that talk. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish up this French cat attack and close out the French turn. These two guys can attack because they're adjacent. Actually, all 3 of these guys can attack if they attack this hex. So these guys are attacking south. These guys are attacking southeast. We're looking at 1 rifle platoon, 2, 3 rifle platoons, a total of 6 combat points, or 6 attack points, versus 12 enemy points. That's 1-to-2. However, you get to subtract 2 from the die roll because it's a close assault attack. A cat attack, you get to subtract 2 from the die roll. Those Mark 1s are not in any kind of woods or town. They get no bonuses for that. In fact, that dispersed guy, we're going to be subtracting 3 from the roll as pertains to him. Because, again, he's dispersed. So here's hoping for a good roll for the French. This could be fun and dramatic if it's a good roll. It's a 2. That's a pretty good roll. Okay, so here's our table. 1-to-2 is the column that we're on. I'll go ahead and expand this for a second. We're on the 1-to-2. He rolled a natural 2. He gets to subtract 2 from the roll. 1, 2. He really rolled a 0. So 0 and 1-to-2 is a double dispersal, or a DD. So everything in that stack is now dispersed. A double D kills a unit that is already dispersed. Oh, plus, when you're dispersed, you're subtracting an additional -1 from the roll anyway. He rolls a -1, he's killed no matter what. So what we wind up with here is kind of a mixed bag of results. We have this unit that was already pinned by Hotchkiss H-39 fired from the south. They're on fire, they're burning, and these 2 platoons are dispersed. So 5 more German tanks are destroyed, and 10 more tanks are disordered. Okay, and that pretty much wraps up assaults, which technically you're supposed to do at the end of your turn, but it's all part of movement, so bear with me. And nothing else is going on up there, so it's fine. On a battle this big, a battlefield this big, and the overall unit density is pretty low, what the battle will end up doing, what the game will usually tend to do, is condense into a series of small engagements that are almost separate from each other. So these French tanks down here on the central road that did not fire now get to move. And they're going to start... Oh, you know what? It's time for some... Oh, they're in woods. Damn it. I thought I was going to overrun some German tanks. Alright, they're not going to be able to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That tree line there is saving me from those Mark IIIs. If those Mark IIIs want to engage me, they got to come around the trees. And when they come around the trees, they're moving. And when they're moving, opportunity fire. The point of Panzer Leader a lot of times, guys, is to look at your attack factor. What's even more important than your attack factor is your range. This 2 or this 3 that's here in the upper right hand corner. That's how far your guns can reach. Ask the Russians. They'll tell you all about it. Who cares how powerful your guns are? If they can't reach the enemy and the enemy's guns can reach you, you're up shit's creek. I don't care how powerful your guns are. If they don't reach far enough, you're in trouble. So you have to sort of gauge distance, you have to gauge time, you have to pay attention to the turn sequence, and the trick is to make the enemy come at you. Take the key ground, make the enemy attack you that he has to attack. Or, inversely, don't attack key ground that the enemy has already seized unless you can go around it, unless you can drop smoke screens, unless you can flank it and attack it from a different angle that the enemy isn't watching or doesn't have guns prepared for, something like that. Try not to ever give the enemy the first shot. Sometimes it's inevitable, and that's what the Germans kind of had to bite the bullet here in the center. But you shove your crappier tanks up front, and you hopefully kind of bait the enemy into, shooting at your poor tanks, sparing your good tanks. If I do that, they're going to be kind of isolated, so I won't do that. 1, 2, actually 1, 2, off the road, 3, 4, 5. They got plenty of movement. I'm going to get 2 triple stacks here. You're allowed to have 3 units in a hex. Panzer Leader in the book says 4. There's a 3, and I've explained why like 100 times, so I won't go into it again. I don't want to bore everyone to death. Alright, how about this stupid anti-tank gun? 1, double movement rate on roads. 2, he'll go ahead and deploy the gun here. He moved less than half of his movement, and that's a gun less than 75 millimeters, so he's able to deploy all in one turn. More French movement. These S-35s are great, man. They have that movement of 8. Sharbies are fun too. They don't have that much extra firepower because their guns are very badly laid out, and they only have a movement rate of 6. These are the worst tanks the French have on the board, these Hotchkiss H-35s. And they're still better than the Germans in some regards. What the Germans' advantage is in training, tactics, doctrine, and communications. And you're going to see that on German Turn 3 when they can fire their tanks and then move half their movement. French tanks cannot do that. And again, that's radios, that's doctrine, that's training, and that's where you're going to see the advantage of the German armor as opposed to the French, which just have bigger guns and thicker armor. A vehicle unit is never allowed to enter a stream hex, so I can't quite flank these armored cars around the side, but I can push them out of there. I'm going to go ahead and unload that anti-tank on there. Actually, I'm going to move and then unload them. I'm giving up a concrete town hex for a wooden town hex, which is a lot less of a defense bonus, but I need that additional field of fire. Back here in this hex, guys, what you'll notice is that my own town blinds half of my arc of fire. So I'm going to deploy forward a little bit so I have a better arc of fire in case the Germans get cute and send armored cars down this road for whatever reason. Alright, and I'm pretty sure that is close to it for French movement. Actually, these guys are going to go ahead and reinforce their pals down here. There's a German infantry gun up here that can hit me, but I'm not that worried about it. I'm going to break into open ground. 1, again, double movement rate on roads. 1, 2, 3, 4, up a hill. 5. I'll stay there for now. No, I won't. 6, 7. This guy's burning. Get these infantry up here to sort of defend this town hex. That's fine. Alright, cool. That'll be it for French movement. The French have nothing dispersed, so there's nothing to rally. That would have already happened anyway. That's going to conclude French turn 2. Cat them! Hell yeah, he says. Screw the rec counters, I want poofs. Jen, I put poofs in my rec counters. You can see little explosions with little smoke clouds on there. Cool. Just checking out the chat here. I have like an iPhone and 2 computers with different chats and different things. I also have people on Skype. Got a lot of stuff going on. Alright. So, tell you what, guys, we're just going to go ahead and finish up one more turn in solitaire here. And again, just to give you guys, make sure that we stream something on Sunday, and to mark the anniversary, and also to just give an idea of what's going on with Panzer Leader. Again, if anybody wants to check out Panzer Leader, we've got players lined up. Damon likes to play. Craig likes to play. I know Yavasa definitely wants to get back in this. Yavasa went through 1939 80th anniversary. What did I say? 1989? 1939 80th anniversary of the invasion of Poland. We did that in September of last year. In Panzer Leader. That was a lot of fun. That was really early war armor. So, yeah, that was a fun campaign. And of course, now we're in May of 1940. As far as those anniversaries go. Alright, so German turn 3. Go ahead and start a new tab here. And the nice thing is, because this is Excel, and you just basically save the file like any other computer file, if somebody wants to give this a try, or if maybe we want to take another swing at this next week with Damon, if he gets his internet sorted out, you can always just, go back to a save tab and take another swing at it. The board is always set up. And wherever you have an internet connection and a laptop, you have a gaming table. Okay, so Germans are going to start with call in new artillery. Now the Germans can call in artillery because their artillery was unlimbered last turn. Their artillery is much longer ranged and more powerful than the French artillery. That is 3 batteries of 10.5 centimeter guns. Basically looking at 2nd Battalion of 103rd Panzer Artillery Regiment. And I have plenty of targets. I'm calling in all 3 batteries on that stupid town hex. Okay. So I called in new artillery. Resolve last turn's artillery. There is no last turn's artillery. Airstrikes. Oh my god. It's time for airstrikes, because I like airstrikes. Dun, 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 dun. I'm going to go ahead and get all my airstrikes out of the way here. Because these, some of these Germans are in big trouble. Where are my Germans in the biggest trouble? Here. I'm going to call in 4 Stukas there. Three Stukas is 60 points. And I'm going to call in 4 more Stukas down here to make sure my Panzer Recon guys don't get overrun. I've got artillery to kind of sort this mess out up here. That's mostly soft targets up here. French anti-tank guns, French rifle platoons, things like that. So no worries there. And in the center, I have a lot more tanks. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully leave my panzers to handle the stuff there in the center. But meanwhile, here in the south center and here in the extreme south, the French tanks sort of have the upper hand. I want to go ahead and get that straightened out as soon as I can. So, yep, here comes some airstrikes. That is the air phase. There are no anti-aircraft guns for the French. Yes, that's actually sadly kind of true. The most we could have possibly put in are literally the whole division has two batteries of 25 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. The entire division has about 8 guns, 25 millimeter automatic cannon. That ain't squat. And I didn't even put them here in this because I know where, okay, 76 motorized artillery regiment maybe, but I know where this unit was according to these maps, and they weren't in this part of the battlefield. So I'm not really cheesing the French here when I say they don't have any anti-aircraft guns versus Stukas. This is part of why the Stuka was so successful in 1940. The Allies just weren't ready for it. Excuse me, the Allies just weren't ready for it. Alrighty. So I've called in my artillery, I've called in my airstrikes. Let's resolve some airstrikes. It's 8 for defense versus 40. I'm putting 2 Stukas on each S-35. So it's 4-to-1 odds. I got 2 attacks at 4-to-1 odds down here in the south. And we got 2 4s for this one down here. That is going to be 2 5s because they're in the woods, and that's enough for a kill. We have 2 burning French tanks down here. Now this is going to knock the teeth out of a big stack of the French tanks. But you're about to see just how useless German tanks are against these things. And also, you're about to see how, I mean, I've literally used up all my Stukas in one turn. I had 8 total available strikes, and I've just used them up. Oh, by the way, if you're waiting for that German artillery back here, these 10.5s, put too much of a dent in French tanks, don't bother. Because high explosive H-class indirect fire weapons versus armor is always halved. So, yeah, it's not going to be terribly effective against these thick-skinned French tanks. Now, these guys are not in woods, so I'm going to go ahead and try and bomb these 2 guys as well. Again, 2 more attacks at 2-to-1 odds. I'm sorry, at 4-to-1 odds. S-35 number 1, toast. S-35 number 2, hella toast. Alright, so that's 2 more wrecked French tanks. And that was the Luftwaffe's entire participation in the battle. They're now done. But they may have just saved things in the, they may have saved things a little bit for the Germans here in the south. All right, cool. That's it for airstrikes. We now go to direct fire. Oh my God, there's a lot going on here. Here are the Somua S-35s who wish they could withdraw earlier. We're about to find out why they wish they could withdraw. So I have a swarm of these Mark IIs, Panzerkampfwagen Mark IIs. They do only have an attack of 2, but they are point blank, so they get to add, or so they get to double, because they are A-class weapons at point blank. So they all count as 4, and there are 7 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This guy can't help because he's pinned down. This guy can't help because he's burning. So I got a total of 7 operational platoons that all double. Okay, guys, we're about to learn about something called concentration of firepower. 7 times 4 is 28. That's that front rank. I have them stacked up almost like Romans. That's my first rank of Mark IIs. I have 3 platoons of Mark IIIs here. They are in range. They are not point blank, so they don't get to double. So I got 3 6s up here. So 28 plus 3 6s is 18. 46. These guys are in range, but they don't double because they're not point blank, so that's going to be 6 more points. Plus 6. These guys are within range. 2 is the range, so within 2 hexes. However, they're not point blank, they don't double, but it's 3 more 6s. That's going to be another 18. Plus 18. 70. These guys are in range because they have long-ranged howitzers. However, they're outside of 2 hexes, which means that they cut in half. So these 2 5s are really 1 5. Or, to be technical, it's 2.5 plus 2.5. So basically that's 5 more points there. And the rest of these German tanks are too far away, and they have I-class weapons they can't help. So this whole regiment, almost, is going to fire on this one company of S-35s, and they're going to do a total of 75 points. That includes those 2 platoons of Mark IVs there in the back. 75 points divided by 16, 2 8s there in the S-35, is a, 75 divided by 16, that is, 4 to 1. So you know what, I'm going to leave off those PzKpfwW Mark IV because they're not really helping very much. So it's just going to be 70 divided by 16, that's close enough. Sometimes players get really cagey as far as, you know, how many tanks do I really want to shoot. In fact, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So you want to get to a certain column in Panzer Leader. 4 to 1 is usually a good bet when you're trying to kill somebody. It's 5 out of 6 is a kill. 7 to 1's even better, obviously, but that's really hard. But for that's the I really want to kill you column, 4 to 1, and 7 to 1 is, you know, there's such a thing called overkill column. Is when you hit something at 7 to 1. But for now, so I want to get to the 4 to 1, but I don't want to waste too much firepower. And these Mark IIs are going down hard. But if I could possibly help it, I'd like to give them one last shot at something besides these S-35s. So, oops, that was the wrong button. So I'd rather those I'd rather these PzKpfwW IIs shoot at something else with their last 5 seconds on planet Earth. So 4, 4, 4, 4, 6, 6, 6, 2, 2, 2, 6, 6, 6. And I'm going to throw in those, no, that won't give it to me. I'm going for 64, because obviously I'm shooting at 8 plus 8 equals 16 times 4 is 64. I'm aiming at 64. So far I am at, I'm going to have to throw in at least 1 platoon of those Mark IIs I was trying to avoid. That's 62, and I'm going to throw in those 2 platoons of Mark IVs after all. That's 5 total. It gets me to 67. That's probably the neatest I can get that math. Divide all that by 16 again is just over 4 to 1. Again, because you always round in favor of the defender, it's a bad idea if you can possibly help it to attack something at 5 to 1 or 6 to 1 or 4.9 to 1 because you're throwing away points at that rate. You want to get as close to an even 4 to 1 as you can. So everything is firing except for these 2 platoons. They're going to fire at something else. Other than that, everything here is shooting at these 2 platoons of S-35s. They are in woods. I have to add 1 to the die roll. And that is, oops, wrong key. I hit the media player instead of, that is 2 more burning platoons of S-35s. And that's most of the German fire phase. The other German fire phase is going to be these 2 guys here are going to go ahead and shoot at these guys that are right next to them. That's going to be a total of 4 plus 4 is 8. Yeah, they're going to engage one of these 8 platoons at 1 to 1 odds. Yeah, this is last ditch desperate panic fire pretty much. Again, 8 against 5 is a sloppy 1 to 1. Maybe I can pin somebody down. 4, I even missed that. 4 is a no effect on a 1 to 1. Oh God. Okay, what's going on down here? More German point blank fire. Actually, these guys are in the open. I'm going to go ahead and do an overrun on them. So I'm going to save that for movement. What's going on down here? Do I want to fire or do I want to move? Everybody's in, no, he's in the open. But I can't overrun tanks with armored cars. That's actually illegal. So I have to shoot. Or I can run away. Motorcycle's definitely running away. So yeah, I'm declaring no fire down here. Okay, keep the turn sequence straight. Up here, all these guys fired opportunity fire, so they don't get to attack anyway. Alright, cool, that's going to be it for German direct fire. We now go to German movement. I'll start in the north and work my way down. German movement, German movement. It's a mass infantry assault, including engineers. Oh no, German engineers, my favorite. One of my favorite units of all time. They are going to cat attack the ever-living crap out of this northern hex here. Other movement, again for people that didn't fire. That 25mm anti-tank gun is going to take a poke at one of those Mark IIIs, one of these Mark IIs as he ran through there. He scored a 5 at 2-1 that is dispersed. So one of these platoons of Mark Is remains pinned back here. There's a lot going on in here, folks. There's infantry charges, tanks, anti-tank fire. We got German guns here behind the woods, or German tanks behind the woods. We got French tanks flanking around the south. This little town that you can't even see the name of anymore. There's a lot going on, which is historically, there was a really savage battle in that tiny little village. Crehen, if I'm even coming close to saying that right. Cool, so that all took place. Okay, German direct fire will also include rallies. Can I rally this guy? They're morale B, so I need a 1 through a 4. A 1, he does rally. Those two platoons of Mark Is in the south. A 5 and a 2. One of them made it, one of them didn't. Alrighty. And now German turreted AFVs can move half after they attack. Most of them rallied or attacked during opportunity fire, so they can't attack now, but they can move half if they want. They're pretty much going to stay where they are. They're providing fire support into this, into that infantry attack on that village. Where I have a little bit of a problem, however, is I have 4 platoons of halfway decent H-35s about to flank and hit my Mark IVs. That's not so good. So you know what? I am going to get a little gamey. Fire and displace. There, now I've denied them most lines of fire. In fact, I've denied them all lines of fire. Those H-35s will not be shooting at me next turn. Except maybe on that guy. He's just out of gas. Okay, down here we have some movement. All these guys fired, so they can't overrun. They can move up to half. But do they want to? Oh, you know what I forgot to do? These 6 platoons were supposed to fire at that truck. Let's just go ahead and save ourselves some trouble here. Kaboom. They machine gunned the hell out of that truck. And that's a destroyed unit in that town axe. Unit, technically speaking, it's not a unit. Empty trucks never count towards victory conditions. Empty trucks never count toward holding an objective. Empty trucks / half trucks count as combat units because they have machine guns. But empty unarmed carrier units never count as vehicles for most purposes. Alrighty. Movement down here. Like I said, I did want to do at least one overrun so you guys can see how it worked. I've got 2 platoons of S-35s in the open. They're not next to any woods hex sides. Okay, we're doing an overrun. This is going to get bloody, folks. Because those S-35s are going to kick on the way down. 1. Damn it. Hold on. Slight mess up with the map there. Okay, these 2 platoons of Mark IIIs. 1, 2, 3, 4. They're going to get opportunity fired before that. 1, 2, 3, and they're going to overrun. So we have an overrun happening here, an overrun happening there, an overrun happening here. Those 10 tanks are being overrun by German tanks from 3 directions. So this is a hell of a little Flames of War table. This is about the size of a Flames of War table, or I shouldn't say Flames of War. This is about the size of a 15mm gaming table. 4 hexes is roughly the size of a 15mm table, 6 foot by 4 foot approximately. So if you picture a 6 foot by 4 foot 15mm table, kind of shaped like that, that's what we're looking at. And on that table we have 40 German tanks versus 10 French tanks. And the German tanks are approaching from 3 sides of the table. That's what we're looking at right now. Technically that's 15, because these guys are going to shoot from off the table and try to help out, as those Mark IIs also do their counterattack. So, what are we going to do? Obviously the ones we really want to kill are those Mark IIIs, because they're the most powerful. Not all those Mark IIIs are in range. Well, actually they are. Okay, all 3 S-35 platoons will fire at the Mark IIIs. I keep forgetting those S-35s have an advantage in range. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and launch opportunity fire against German mass overrun that's coming in against those S-35s. They may be able to break it up. So I have a grand total of 12 plus 12, because again, those S-35s at point blank range are doubled. 12 plus 12 plus 6 is a total of 30 points coming in. I can attack 2 of them at 2-to-1 odds. I think I will do that. And if I do that, I'm not going to kill anybody, but I'm going to break up this I'm going to break up this overrun and live to fight another day. Excuse me. Sorry, everybody. Or should I go for a kill? You know what? That's one of the last rolls of the game, so at least of this stream. I'll let the chat decide. Do those S-35s try to almost certainly kill 1 platoon of Mark IIIs, or do they try to pin down both platoons of Mark IIIs? These are these more powerful tanks here. And so one is more gratifying. It kills Germans and knocks out one of the better German tank units in the game. There's only, I think, 4 of these Mark III platoons on the table. So it's, bad news if the Germans lose one. Germans had very few Mark IIIs. I know S-35 versus Mark III, Osprey even has a book about it, is the classic 1940 matchup. But damn, both types of tanks were super rare. So if the Germans lose 1 platoon of Mark IIIs, that's bad news for them overall. Immediately, however, it might be a better idea to pin down both platoons of Mark IIIs, because that means that neither of those 6 attack factors get to participate in the overrun. So if anybody is still on the chat, let me know if you have a preference, whether those S-35s will try to kill a Mark III or pin 2 Mark III platoons. We'll see what our online tacticians say here. Yvasa says pin, Skobak says pin. Okay, we got some tacticians on the table. It's not going to feel as good, but it's going to save probably this platoon of S-35s, or these 2 platoons of S-35s. Okay, so that gives us a total of 30 versus 12. That is 2-to-1. And again, there are... Alright, so 2-to-1. While they're in the open, while they're still in that open hex back here. So a 1 will kill them. A 4 or 5... I'm sorry, a 1 will kill them, 2, 3, 4, 5 will pin, and a 6 is a miss. 2-to-1 isn't the best shot, but again, we're going for a pin here, not for kills, per the chat's request. So here we go with 1d6. This is important. Let's see what happens. We have a 3. As expected, that is 2 pinned units. So these 2 units are pinned. They're stuck in that hex, which means if the Germans want to continue this overrun attack, those Mark IIIs are going to have to go past them and attack out of the woods. So now we're down to 6 platoons rather than 8, and the 2 most powerful German platoons are missing. Their total I keep calling it counterattack. Their total overrun is now only 12. 12 versus 12. It's 1-to-1 odds. because I've got, 6 2s versus 2 6s. It's 12 to 12. It's 1-to-1 odds. Whenever you're doing an overrun attack, you get to subtract 2 from the die roll. You also automatically bump up 1 odds column. So it's 2 to 1 modified minus 2 to the die roll. The odds are 50-50 that those S-35s are killed anyway. And here comes the roll. That is a 1. That is 2 more wrecked platoons of S-35s. All right, the Germans have pretty much won down here along this road. That was pretty good for the Germans. Not so good for some of these other guys. These Mark IIs are about to die in a hardcore way. Technically, they can withdraw 1 hex. They can withdraw 2 hexes. Because they fired and now they're moving half their movement. They have 5 movement points. If they move again, they're going to expose themselves to opportunity fire. They're going to go for it. So opportunity fire only works, guys, if, you know what, they're going to stay where they are. Because they're going to give up the woods cover. But no. Okay, so let me explain what's going on here. They started off here. A German unit, German tank unit, a turreted AFV. You have to be an armored unit and you have to have a turret. You have to be able to have that kind of tactical flexibility in order to access this rule. In this scenario, you also have to be German, because Germans have radios, throat mics, they're in touch with all their commanders. They have a tactical flexibility that the French cannot match. So what the Germans are doing here, the French cannot do. And as the Germans, this Mark II company in here realizes that they're practically surrounded and it's time to seek an urgent appointment elsewhere. So they can move. A vehicle counter can never move through a green hex side, through these green tree lines. You can never move through a tree line, ever, unless you're on a road. Barring that, you can't move through a tree line at any. There's no like, oh, it's -1 on movement. No, you can't drive tanks through a solid bowcast tree line, unless there's a road there. So, what we're going to be looking at here is he's going to try and get out of there if he possibly can. Here's the issue. Opportunity fire only triggers when you have moved 1/4 of your movement in enemy line of sight continuously. So he has a movement of 10. That's the 10 there on the lower right. That means that 1/4 of his movement is 2.5 hexes, basically 3 hexes. So 1. Oh my god. Alright, try that again. That's 1 from the original point. 2. He can't back up through these tree lines. He can't go back through here because these hexes are overstacked. There's too many tanks clogging up the road. Now, here's where he's got to make a choice. He can stop right there and not take opportunity fire. He's only moved 2 hexes. So the French can't shoot at him until it's his turn. However, there are still French units adjacent to him, so they still have him spotted. The French armor phase, or the French fire phase, they're going to blast into him. It won't be quite as bad because these 2 guys can't help, but it's going to be bad. He's made things a little bit better. Now, if he falls back his 3rd hex, he has a couple things to consider here. Number 1, he's no longer in tree cover, so he loses that +1 modifier to his die roll. He's basically in open terrain now. That's bad news. The good news is he's now in range of only 1 platoon or 1 company of tanks. These 3 platoons here. And they're no longer point blank. So here, he was up against 30, 60, 20. He was up against 80 attack factors in 2010. So here, he was up against 80 attack factors. He was dead. Here, he's up against 30, 15, 45, and 10, 65. Here, he's up against 30, 15, that's 45, 0. And by the time he gets all the way here, he's only up against 15. So he went from 80 to 15. That's a good chance. However, he's still in the open. Bad news point number 3. These guys are going to fire. These guys can't fire even if they wanted to. They're out of range. Note their range is 2. So anything that he manages to pin down is going to get overrun on the French turn. The Panzer Leader is one of those games where it's on the one hand, on the other hand, on the one hand, on the other hand. And this is where things get serious. So just for now, he's going to go ahead and do that. Spoiler alert, anything that survives here is going to go ahead and keep running. He has 2 more movement points left. Again, he can move half of his movement per the split move and fire rule. But it's going to be 15 versus 5. They're going to try and kill or pin 1 platoon of Mark IIs. 5, that's a pin. So he's pinned in the open. That's very bad news for him. His 2 comrade platoons, more or less... Damn it with the map. Are going to more or less abandon him. And they're going to fall back to that tree line there. They turn behind them. Heinz, what are you doing? You're stuck on the road. It's too late. They're dead. Because now these French units are going to bum rush them next turn. These guys have fire. They've taken opportunity fire. These guys haven't. And they have access to 7 movement points in their movement phase. They're going to overrun and kill them. And an overrunning a pinned down unit is very, very bad. And there's practically no German counterfire to break it up. So yeah, those Mark IIs are in real trouble. I think that's going to be it for German movement. Yeah, Chip agrees on those S-35s down here to pin. Everybody agreed to pin. The dice kind of made it a moot point, but it was a good idea, and it definitely could have worked. Oh, I was going to do something here down here with the Germans to pull out. How can I do this where I expose myself to very little fire? Alright, you know what? These armored cars are so freaking fast. By the time they use a quarter of their movement rate, they're out of range of any French gun. So they're literally just going to fishtail around and put the pedal to the metal and scot-free just fall back that way. Alright, what else is going on? Same with those motorcycles. I'm going to sacrifice those trucks to stand there. Empty trucks. These engineers, they kind of realize that they're in trouble, so they're just going to spend 1-2 points to fall back before they get pretty much swarmed by these French tanks down here to the south. They're going to grab their lunch out of the glove box here in these trucks that brought them here, and then they're just going to leave the trucks there. That forces the French player to at least blow up the trucks and then haul ass around the other way. It's going to be a pain in the ass, but it's as a play for time. Here, the Germans are definitely falling back. It's a tiny little German recon battalion up against the front edge of a full dragoons regiment of French tanks. So, yeah, they're not. The French are definitely winning here in the south. Not so much in the center. Well, in the south center, they're definitely losing. In the center, it's kind of even. Well, no, 2 Somua S-35s are running. Yeah, we'll see. And then up here in the north, it's also pretty even. Oh, I was going to do my big cat attack. And cat attacks are subject to French opportunity fire, so... Oh my god. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm going to try and knock down those engineers at 1-to-1. I have to. Have to. I can't because those mortars have no line of sight. They have to shoot at somebody else. Alright, they're going to engage these rifles. 1 rifle at 1-to-1, 1 rifle at 1-to-2. 1-to-1, 2 is a pin, 1-to-2, 2 is a pin. Holy crap! The French kind of shut down the northern edge of that assault with counterfire. Okay, now in comes the rest of the somewhat weakened German close assault. 1, 2, 3 platoons of motorized infantry, 4th platoon of motorized infantry, and a platoon of combat engineers. So we're looking at a total of 11 points versus the French total of 6 plus 6 is 12, 13. That is What do you mean, dude? 6 plus 6 plus 3 is 15. Sorry. 15 versus 11. That is 1 to 2 odds against the Germans. Cat attacks. Always subtract 2 from the die roll, as I've said. Add 1 to the die roll for attacking in wooden buildings. Add 1 odds column because the Germans have combat engineers in the hex. So whenever you do a close assault with infantry, if you can possibly help it, include engineers. If you can include engineers, those are guys with flamethrowers, satchel charges, everyone, specialized assault equipment. They're gonna really help you out. So what that winds up being is 1 to 1 net, subtract 1 from the die roll. We're going to see if we can throw the French out of that hex. 6 becomes a 5. That is no effect. That assault failed. That's going to conclude the German turn. Take a quick zoom out here as we begin the French turn. Okay, the first thing the French are going to do is they're going to call in new artillery. The French definitely have, oh, that's right, they still can't reach that shit, damn it. Alright, what are the French going to do? French. I'm going to bet that at least one of these platoons fails its movement, or its rally phase. I would love to call in artillery on all this. This is artillery dream target. I'm not quite in range, though. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Bullshit! He's in range. Some of these Germans blundered into range. Okay, guys, remember when I was saying before how artillery works in Panzer Leader? It's a very powerful weapon, but it's a kind of a pain in the ass because you have to kind of guess where the enemy's going to be next turn. So what do you do with artillery? You call it in on people who can't move. Infantry units that are pinned. I don't care if you're German, I don't care if you're Aquaman. If you are pinned and you rally, you can't move. You never get the split move and fire rule. I don't care if you're German, I don't care if you're Morale A, I don't care if you're Captain America. You are not moving after being unpinned in the same turn. So those two platoons, whether they're rallied or not, are definitely still going to be there next turn. And I have many French units, including a headquarters unit, that have eyes point blank on that target. So they are calling in whatever French artillery they can, these 2 batteries of 75s. Fire danger close, expend all remaining ordnance in my perimeter. They are being overrun by Germans on 3 sides. They are calling in whatever artillery they can there. And that is going to splash right on their heads. The Germans will be in better shape if they manage to rally. Their morale B and their infantry, so I don't like their chances. But even if they rally, they'll still be there. And next turn, they're going to be killed or dispersed again by concentrated French howitzer fire. Piotr says, you gotta, I guess he meant spin the one. Got to pin this one to save, gotta skip this one. Save all. Yeah, Piotr, I know it's like super late where you are. We're about to wrap up anyway. I super appreciate it. Normally these streams run a little longer, but we have a live opponent. It's a little bit more fun when there's a live opponent. You guys are literally logging onto this Twitch stream to watch me play with myself, which sounds kind of weird. So yeah, we're gonna wrap this one up pretty shortly here. We're gonna pretty much finish up this French turn and then go ahead and take off. Okay, so meanwhile, the French artillery that he called in last turn is gonna go ahead and splash this turn. We've got 2 7-point batteries. They are landing on armored targets, so they get cut in half. So I really got a total of 7 points. Here's the bad. That was the bad news. Here's the good news. Artillery affects everything in the hex equally. So if you have 2 or 3 units in a hex, it affects everything as its own separate individual attack with full firepower. So I've got, it's not 7 versus 10, it's 7 versus 5 and 7 versus 5 again. So 7 versus 5 on the undispersed platoon, that's 1 to 1. He is in woods, so I get +1 to my die roll. Basically, a 1 or a 2 will pin me down. 5, no effect. Artillery doesn't usually have an effect on armored vehicles. That's just the way, war works. However, this other one is in a lot worse shape. He is pinned down already, so a double D will kill him, and he has to subtract 1 from his roll. That offsets the +1 he gets for being in woods. So this is another 1-to-1 attack. 7 versus 5 is 1-to-1, and that's going to be with no die roll modifier. So let's see what happens here. 5 is, yeah, no additional effect. So yeah, the French tried, but their artillery just isn't built for taking on German tanks. No airstrikes. Now we go to French direct fire. Some French units have already fired. All these guys have fired at one target or another. These 2 haven't, so they'll be taking a shot. I'll do that now. 10 plus 10 plus 5 plus 5. It's a total of 30 points into these Mark IIs, and some of them are still pinned. So how do I want to kill these guys? These 20 are going to engage this first one at 4-to-1 odds. 1, he is hella killed. And then these 10 are going to engage the dispersed one at 2-to-1 odds. Subtract 1 from the die roll. A double D will kill him. That's a 5. That becomes a 4. He is still just pinned down. But that is another German wreck counter in that hex. And the remaining tanks in there are pinned down. Again, nothing, nothing, nothing. These guys all fired. These 3 units down here fired. Nobody else did. They're going to go ahead and make their movement now. There's no opportunity fire that can help those Germans. I-class weapons, out of range, blocked by woods, and he's dispersed. So I'm going to go ahead and do this 3-to-1. That's 5, 5, and 5 versus that 5 becomes 4-to-1. Again, it's an overrun. Subtract 2 from the die roll. That's what you call an insta-kill. There is no dice roll that can save the Germans there. Panzer Leader does allow you to get to the point, guys, where you can kill tanks or you can kill units without picking up the dice. The game can get very chessy, can get a pretty, scientific, under the right circumstances. It's not always the case, but very often the case. Alright, any more direct fire? Well, that was technically movement. I'm kind of playing fast and loose with the turn sequence here. I'm going to try and turn the German flank there a little bit. Try to get at some of these soft, squishy panzers rather than these tough panzers up here. Okay, what's going on down here? Oh, these Stukas are gone. I'm just going to say that truck is destroyed. Kind of like I did for this truck up here. It did take that S-35's attack factor to do it, though. So what am I going to do with this other platoon? Let's keep our tanks together. Let's not get too ballsy with the French. I took opportunity fire. He needs to fall back. He's about ready to get. Oh, he took direct. He took opportunity fire. He's already fired. He's going to join this group down here in the south. Now, that just means that these French are going to get outflanked by these Germans here on turn 4 moving forward, but there's only so much the French can do. That's going to pretty much wrap up the French turn. Everybody here has either moved or fired, and the French cannot do both, unlike some German units. I've called in my new artillery. I have no airstrikes, and that's pretty much going to wrap up the French turn. They are starting to do pretty decent damage here. We've got more burning German tanks up here, more burning German tanks down here. It is, it's starting to turn into a little bit of a battle here, folks. Alright, guys, so, cool. We've been going now for about a little bit more than 2 hours. I'm going to go ahead and call the stream here. Again, I do apologize. This was supposed to be a live game against an actual opponent. The person that was kind of prepared to do so, unfortunately had some internet problems. We did have an offer for someone to jump in the middle of the game, and that was appreciated. I don't know if that would have worked because, again, this is kind of a big game, and the person I was talking to run the game today got the file ahead of time. He was already briefed on the history, on the special rules, on the units, what side he was playing, so on and so forth. You can jump into a Panzer Leader battle and just pretty much pick it up and run with it if it's designed to do that. This particular Panzer Leader game was pretty historical. Large but kind of simple. But it was kind of too big to sort of expect somebody to leap into it at the last minute. If I had known I was going to be switching players before the stream, I would have just grabbed one of my stock games, and we could have done that last minute. But it is what it is. It's no worries. Hopefully you guys enjoyed some of the stream anyway. Again, early war Panzer Leader. Early war Panzer Leader in France, 1940, Soviet Union, 41, and the desert in 42 in mid-war, I feel is really where it's at. By the time you get into 43, Panzer Leader is still fun. It's one of the best war games ever made. And I mean that seriously. I'll prove that point in just a second. I will quantifiably prove that in just a minute here. However, it's not Panzer Leader. It's so much as how the battlefield started to reshape itself in 43, 44, and 45. So by the time you get to 43 on the west, you're talking about Sicily and Italy, which are not really good tank battles. Those are infantry and artillery engagements. Some tanks, obviously, but tanks don't really play a huge role in those campaigns. Then you get into 44, obviously Normandy, then into the Battle of the Bulge. There are some fun battles to do in the Bulge. There are some hella fun tank battles to do in the Bulge. Original 1974 Panzer Leader has some great Battle of the Bulge scenarios. We might do some of those times. It also gives me an excuse to make up some cool winter boards here in Photoshop, which are fun to look at. And of course, that's all Americans. And anytime I can put Americans on the table, it's always a good day for me. Market Garden as well. Market Garden has some good ones, especially the 30 Corps advance up Hell's Highway. You've got some great tank battles between 30 Corps, Irish Guards, things like that, and 9th and 10th, I think it is, SS Panzer Divisions. So there are some exceptions, but by and large, at least my opinion, at the command tactical level, 44 and 45 starts to get a little boring. And then, of course, you move on into the post-war, Arab-Israeli wars, things like that. And those are fun, but for totally different reasons. So, Panzer Leader was originally Panzer Blitz in 1970, Panzer Leader 1974, Arab-Israeli Wars 1977. And then they started to roll out expansions and so on and so forth. Raymond Cruz came out with this, or the original version of this, Panzer Leader 1940. I think he did that in 1978. Multi-Man Publishing took over the license a little bit later in the 80s when Avalon Hill started to, fold up a little bit into Wizards of the Coast and other companies. Brian Train came out with Desert Leader in 2000. Then he got a job, I think, at the State Department. So, yeah, pretty serious people play this game. It's one of the better command tactical war games that's kind of ever been designed. Well, hold on. It's one of the most, let me phrase this very carefully. It's one of the most important command tactical war games ever designed. It's not the best. Not anymore. I mean, we're technically not playing Panzer Leader right here. We're technically playing with an Arab-Israeli Wars rules engine. Because the original Panzer Leader game out of the box is always, has some problems. Not to put it, kindly. Nevertheless, its designer, Jim Dunnigan, we hear about Featherstone, we hear about Priestley, we hear about all these guys. Jim Dunnigan won every friggin' award there was through the 70s, through the 80s, into the 90s. He founded multiple game companies. They all were successful. After he left Avalon Hill, he basically helped put Avalon Hill on the map. Then he went on and started his own companies, and they kicked ass all through the 80s and into the 90s. By the time you get to the end of the 1990s, they ran out of awards to give this man. And so they made up a new award for him called Designer of the Millennium. I'm going to say that again. Jim Dunnigan won an award called Designer of the Millennium. Technically, no one's going to be eligible to win that award again until the year 3000. Okay? And now that he's retired, I'm pretty sure he's retired, we're looking at... they gave him every award there was. They made up a new award and gave it to him. Now they just have the Jim Dunnigan Award. Other designers tried to win the award named after him. He is... quite frankly, one of the most important war game designers that's ever lived. And that's, the global gaming community backs me up on that. I'm not talking about miniatures, I'm not talking about video games, I'm talking about war games, to include miniature games and some computer games. But, miniatures are not the hobby. It's a part of the hobby. Video games and computer games are not the hobby. They're a part of the hobby. Hex and counter games are not the hobby. They're a part of the hobby. But he is... he really did influence pretty much all of these subgenres in a way that is not often a way that is, well, it is appreciated because, again, they gave him literally every award they could, and then when they ran out of awards, they made up a new one, and then they named one after him. So guys like Ty Bomba and Joseph Miranda, people who design for strategy and tactics nowadays, people who design the kind of the awards that they're shooting for, are named after Jim Dunnigan, and Jim Dunnigan is the guy who designed the original Panzer Blitz. So this is not a game that is, people have heard me gush about it a lot before. It's the first game of its kind. It's no longer the best. Other companies have picked up the game system or some of the game concepts and run with it, and there have been huge improvements since then. Technically, this is one of them. We're playing with an Arab-Israeli Wars rules engine here. So we're technically speaking doing it right now, but it's just something that sometimes people ask me, like, why do I love Panzer Leader so much? It is one of the most it's one of the more important war games in not so much the history of warfare, because it's just a game, but the history of war gaming. Again, going back to 1969, 1970. When the first iterations, the first alpha releases, so to speak, of this generalized system was published in the General magazine as far back as 1969. But I've rambled on about this long enough, everybody. We're going to go ahead and call it here at the end of turn 3. This is supposed to be a 10-turn game. Again, this is loosely based on the Panzer Leader 1940 scenario, number 21. That was first published in Panzer Leader 1940 by Raymond Cruz in 1978, and we obviously took a little bit more of a historical swing at it here. And same basic ideas: 2 colliding columns of armor in an open field with a big city to the north. They're doing their best with what was physically available in the physical box set in 1974. Obviously here, with a computer platform, we're able to be a lot more flexible and come up with a much more historically, for one thing, a custom map, a much more historically accurate kind of a rendition of the Battle of Hannut, or the opening of the Battle of Hannut, 12 May 1940. So everybody, again, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Super appreciate everybody who came out. And kind of put up with our difficulties here earlier on. But, maybe we'll come back to this one. We are probably going to be wrapping up our Dien Bien Phu series later on this week with Piotr. He is sending me some historical and design research. We're going to be building a Valor and Victory scenario on that battle. 1954, the last big overruns in the first week of May 1954. Viet Minh versus French paratroopers Foreign Legion, and Allied troops, of course, at the end of the First Indochina War. So stay tuned for that. I know they're still building the compound and some of the last soldiers and troops that are going to be used in the 13 Days to 13 Hours project. And here on the Oriskany desk, so to speak, we are, again, after we wrap up Dien Bien Phu later on this week, we are going to be coming back for more Panzer Leader 1940, and we're going to be coming back hard. Because, again, May and June of 1940 saw one of the most important campaigns of mechanized warfare that we're ever going to see. So we're going to be doing a lot of 80th anniversary games over the next 6 weeks. So we'll hope that you will stay tuned for some of those. For now, this is Oriskany signing off, thanking everybody one more time for all your support on the Sitrep podcast. Like and subscribe and check out our merch on Zazzle.com, and you guys know the drill. Stay safe, enjoy the spring, have a good time, and I'll talk to everybody later on this week. Take it easy, everybody.